I got evidence of an Air Force tanker being in that area, and I got evidence of several military helicopters also being in that area. It's come out just in recent years that the military personnel who were affected by it, and some had some serious medical issues from it, a UFO fly over an area where there was a node and the node deflected at the same time the report came in. That's a little bit more physical, substantial evidence than somebody just saying something happened. And to be honest with you, it's happened more than once. Why would the Special Forces Hercules be there? Why would an Air Force tanker be called in there? My name is Dean Fassnidge. I am the state director of MUFON Oregon. And we have a staff of volunteers who are field investigators. And our job is to record and investigate reports that have come in from our parent organization, which is MUFON's national headquarters in Ohio. We are in 50 states and worldwide. And that's basically our function. I came to this position kind of up through the ranks. I have always had an interest in aerial phenomenon and things of that nature. And basically, when I saw that field investigators were needed for MUFON, I decided to see what was necessary to join the group. And I joined and worked my way through the ranks a little bit up through chief investigator and became state director when the last one retired. And so that's kind of how I got in my position. And basically, I kind of moderate what goes on in the state.
Let's start with the most famous of all, the Roswell Incident of 1947. So what is MUFON's perspective or even your own personal take on this event and its significance?
Well, obviously the Roswell Incident, 1947, is probably the most famous case out of about 3 in that New Mexico area. There was supposedly within a month or so time frame, there was supposedly another crash near Corona. There was one near the Trinity site where the atomic bomb testing was taking place. And of course, all of these, 1947, you've got high government security and secrecy, and everybody says what the government wants them to do. And if they said, don't investigate this, then they didn't. And, through the years, we found out that there have been a number of, shall we say, attempts to kind of send you off and do a tangent as to what occurred, whether it was weather balloons or test dummies or whatever. And I still don't think that we know exactly what happened. I suspect sooner or later, one of these days, we'll get something. There are people who claim to have evidence of remnants of the crash site, but so far don't know much of anything. None of it that's been 100% substantiated.
To what extent do you believe psychological operations or psyops played a role in the events or the narrative surrounding Roswell?
I think to some extent there was. Obviously, with the within a day or so, the weather balloon story came out, and whether the Roswell crash was one of our experimental aircraft or somebody else's. Obviously, the weather balloon was created to deflect interest in that.
Let's move to another interesting case, and that is the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. What are your thoughts on this incident, considering its era and the evidence presented, like hypnotic regression, for example?
Yeah, sure. That's a very good one. Through all of the hypnotic regression and all of that, and the related physical evidence, that's been one that's been really hard to refute over the years. And Of course, all of this took place before our parent MUFON organization was established, which was 1969. So we don't have our investigation of it. That's kind of where we're limited. If it isn't reported to us, we don't go chasing it down.
Something you mentioned that I thought was interesting is the reluctance that witnesses often have. In terms of Oregon, could you discuss the McMinnville Trent farm sighting and its investigation?
There have been a lot of these people who, you tend to have a little bit stronger impression of their event the more they don't want to talk about it. And if we, consider the local event that happened in McMinnville, the Trents didn't really want to tell anybody about it. I mean, they saw it, they grabbed their camera, they got a couple of good photographs, but they didn't tell anybody about it. And it wasn't until they went to like the local bank and the story kind of came out from his brother that even the photos got put in the bank window. And then from there on, some people took notice. They went back to New York on a TV show. And that's when Project Blue Book and a few of the others heard about it, the FBI, and that's when they came to investigate it. And we're talking like a month after the fact. So they were keeping it under wraps for quite a while. And it didn't look like the photos were fake because it's not digital. They were in the middle of a film roll where you had the cows and a party in the beginning of it. And afterwards it was Mom's Mother's Day party.
All right, I want to turn to the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO incident real quick. How does MUFON view this event, just given the multiple visual and radar reports over this sensitive location?
Again, nobody knows quite what it is. Because you didn't really have good follow-up from any kind of a national aspect, like could it have been government? Maybe, but nobody's saying. It's really hard to go beyond that, but certainly was unexplained and kind of remains so today.
What's really interesting to me is the explanations that have been offered historically, like temperature inversions or, the infamous swamp gas. So how do those hold up to today in light of events like the DC incident or even more recent phenomena like the whole drone sightings over the United States and military sites?
Well, I think a lot of that early swamp gas stuff has kind of been refuted, and people don't fall for that much anymore. I think let's talk New Jersey drones. Everybody was seeing them. People in my own group asked about that, and I said, well, think about it. You're seeing a lot of it around government and military sites, installations, forts, and pretty much my take on that, since the government came out and said, don't worry about it. I'm pretty much convinced they were testing the effectiveness of their drone detection equipment. And I think it was more or less kind of a drill to see, when can we detect it? How far out can we detect it? Multiple targets sort of things. I don't think it was anything sinister. I think it was just a test.
The Rendlesham Forest incident involved military witnesses, and there were even reported physical effects. What makes this case compelling or significant from MUFON's perspective?
It's come out just in recent years that the military personnel who were affected by it, and some had some serious medical issues from it, the government agreed to take care of it through the VA. So I can't really say that they're dismissing that too much, because there's just too much evidence. I mean, there's recordings, there were physical effects, and all of these other things that kind of make it hard to refute.
Another thing that I find particularly interesting is that there seems to be a higher concentration of reports in the United States, even though MUFON has an international presence. Do
Sure.
you find that there is a difference in reporting frequency or at least willingness to report in other areas of the world like Europe or South America? And if so, why might that be?
Well, I think that's because we're kind of like the central location for the main civilian UFO reporting organizations, whether it's us at MUFON or New Fork or some of the others. Now, we do have branches in Europe and in South America, 50 other countries. And so we do see the reports. But I think probably in those countries too, if people see something, they're not so willing to talk about it or report it. They say, okay, it happened, but they may not even know where to report it. There's still a lot of people who, if they see something, they don't really know that there is MUFON or New Fork to report these cases to.
Going back to Oregon, where you're state director, do reports tend to concentrate in certain areas like the I-5 corridor versus central or eastern Oregon? And does population density seem to be a primary factor?
That's a good point, because we find that most of our reports for Oregon come from metropolitan locations, as opposed to areas where you might expect to see a lot of it, central or eastern Oregon or Washington. And a lot of it has to do with just the environment and whether that's something that people do, or if they see something, they're more likely to keep it to themselves and not report it. Usually it is from the I-5 corridor sort of thing. A few of them from the coast, very few from central and eastern Oregon, but we do get a few. So I don't know if that's just because people are out there looking, or if it's just because they feel comfortable in reporting it and putting their name to it. And we do get things from Bend, no doubt. But then again, you got to remember Bend is a growing community as well. And, the population is sort of transplants from some of the other metro areas. And so I guess they're a little bit more comfortable in reporting it, just to find out if, we can figure out what it is. There's that. I'll make that distinction. New Fork, which is the National UFO Reporting Center, is located in Washington, in Seattle. They collect reports. The difference between them and MUFON is that MUFON will investigate them. New Fork doesn't investigate. They just create a data bank. And when we investigate, that's part of our investigation. We will compare to see if there is a common report, or if there is something that correlates between the two.
So beyond lights, and orbs or any sort of structured craft, do you guys receive reports detailing more unusual or even high strangeness, like weather anomalies?
Let's first off say most of the common lights and orbs and stuff, it's usually attributed to the International Space Station or Starlink satellites. Sometimes it's planets. We do get an occasional triangle, which would be great if we could get a nice, clear picture of something. But usually it's something that catches somebody off guard and they don't have the time to take a photograph of it or whatever. There have been instances, I won't say a lot, but a few, where something has been attributed to a cloud appearing out of nowhere, something coming out of the cloud. Maybe the person experiences some lost time, and then it goes away. We have credentialed professionals within MUFON who are able to deal with more of the psychiatric type of examinations. And whenever we get cases like that, my job is to kind of do the science end of it and explore those possibilities. And if it goes to more of the encounter type of case, then I give that to the professionals who are more able to do it on a professional level rather than me.
Yeah, I'm actually really interested in how MUFON's intake and investigation process looks like, specifically regarding reports that are just, so profound and life-altering. Could you walk us through what that looks like?
Well, usually, of course, we won't know about it until they report it. If they report it, step one is to look at all of the hard evidence behind it. We look at weather conditions. We look at all of this stuff. Then we will contact the witness, we'll call them, whether by email or by telephone. Sometimes they have a choice as to how they want to be connected to. And after we do an interview and we do our investigation of possibilities that could explain what happened, if we are still at that point where the person really needs some additional input and we can't help beyond that, then I will flag it to our professional, who will contact that person personally and go from more of a professional analysis as far as how it affected the person's psyche and well-being and mental stability, rather than me doing it, because I'm not a professional in that area. We don't try to hide any. All the reports are confidential, of course. Uh, Most of it, if it is compelling, I would say it's indirect evidence that really points to something, but it's nothing that would be 100% hard evidence. Let me give you an example. I know of a case near an airport area where somebody reported seeing a craft followed by helicopters. Okay, so one of our main tools, like you would see on the nightly news, we use Flight Radar 24 to look at transponding aircraft in the area. Okay. If they turned off the transponders, which sometimes military aircraft will do, you don't get it. So there was no picture of the craft. I couldn't see the helicopters, which were probably at low level anyway. But around that, before they stopped pinging, or if they forgot, I got evidence of a Special Forces Hercules aircraft being right in that area. I got evidence of an Air Force tanker being in that area. And I got evidence of several military helicopters also being in that area at the same time. All of this took place, but it's all circumstantial. But this was in a location where, why would the Special Forces Hercules be there? Why would an Air Force tanker be called in there? It's interesting. Is it hard evidence? No, but it's certainly circumstantial.
Something else I've wondered throughout this interview is, do you or MUFON analyze the aggregated data to look for patterns, like geographic hotspots, temporal clusters, or, correlations between sighting types and specific conditions?
Well, I get to look at all of the reports from Oregon for sure. I have the capability to look at any report that comes in if I want to. Each month, our national headquarters compiles the very information you just said and puts it out to each state individually. So I get a chance to see if there's any patterns or if something develops. Of course, I'm going to see it too. But we do look for those kind of patterns as well. I can't say that there's anything that's happened that would give a pattern such as the drones that we're seeing in New Jersey, sort of thing. The only thing that came close was several months ago, where a number of aircraft flying from the coast to the Eugene area were seeing all sorts of anomalous lights that had some unusual characteristics. They were contacting the air controllers, both Portland, Seattle, and the local, saying, hey, anything going on over there? Any military exercises? And they're all saying no. Some of them had these anomalous blips on radar. Some of the local controllers said, hey, that's kind of cool. Will you take a picture for me? And so they were out there taking pictures with their cell phones. And it wasn't just one flight that saw it, it was a number of commercial aircraft all the way up and down the coast were seeing these lights with highly unusual characteristics that you would expect, the quick movements, up and down, sideways, kind of phenomenal speeds. There was even a Coast Guard helicopter flying along the coast I think they were coming back on a training mission or something like that. They also were seeing these lights and were privy to the radio information that was coming across. But of course, theirs was more muted and secured rather than, American Airlines or somebody flying into the coast. But there was a great deal of interest. You can still find these recordings on YouTube, and they're all pretty amazed. They don't know what it is, and the flight controllers don't know what it is either. But there was never any other explanation that came out of it.
In all your years with MUFON, has there been a case that stood out or even a piece of evidence that has just been so exceptionally compelling or difficult to explain away?
Well, it has to do with a lot about how much you believe the person reporting it. And after you do the personal interviews, even though there's really no hard, substantial evidence, you got to say, boy, this person really saw something. And, it's more or less subjective and personal, but there's some people who, didn't really want to report it, but did. And so it's kind of compelling that you would probably put a lot of stock in what they're saying.
Something that's even affected me in just doing this is witness distress can be very telling. On that note, do reports submitted to MUFON sometimes include descriptions of humanoid figures or entities in association with what they saw?
Very, very rarely, but it does happen where somebody says they think they saw something, and beyond that they don't have physical evidence for it, then that too is also passed on to our professionals who, they're well trained in analysis of the mind and how to follow up on this. And if, hypnotic regression is called for, then they can say where to go and do this.
What's your thoughts on the 1997 Phoenix Lights event, considering the fact that there were so many witnesses and, explanations like flares?
The Phoenix Lights, well, you mentioned earlier Psyops. I think originally saying that they were flares was part of the initial Psyops operation, but there are too many people from too many different angles who witnessed something that would be slightly different, but looked at the lights a different way. There's people who even said it, was slowly moving over their house. And one of the things we look for that is collaborating type of evidence. If you've got more than one witness, multiple witnesses who have evidence of the same thing, that's a pretty strong, compelling piece to say that, hey, there was something there. And I think the Phoenix Lights have not truly been explained away yet.
Another strange case that's stuck out to me for a while is the 1973 Pascagoula Incident. I wanted to ask you, how does this incident stand out in the history of reports that you've looked at?
There was all sorts of interesting details to that. And, I think originally they tried to explain it away, but boy, I haven't seen anything that says one way or the other, this didn't happen, because it's pretty compelling what happened down there. Really, a lot of the things we get, sometimes people are reporting things that happened to them 10, 20 years ago, because all of a sudden they say, well, maybe I can tell this organization about it and they can shed a little light on it. Well, sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. We're called upon, we have a pretty large database and a group of investigators. And I'm sure many of your listeners are well familiar with Skinwalker Ranch and all of the stuff going on there. Well, initially, when Robert Bigelow owned the property, he contracted with MUFON to do some collaborative studies down there. So part of the initial, let's say the ATIP $22 million, that all went to Robert Bigelow. And most of it went to investigating Skinwalker Ranch. Some of it went to contract work with MUFON, and some of it helped develop our upgraded computer database.
How significant was that collaboration for MUFON in general? I mean, even in terms of like methodology or organizational development, any of that?
Well, of course, a lot of it was all confidential. A lot of it was NDA. A lot of it was NDAs. But basically, it was contract work. So there was, tit for tat. So you do this, and we'll help you with that. But nothing that you haven't seen on the TV show or anything like that. So,
would you say that the collaboration benefited MUFON? For instance, in terms of like data acquisition, investigation techniques, or even legitimacy?
I think it helped with the legitimacy of the organization because it was, sort of connected to funding, government funding, and an established organization. At the time, it was NIDS, group. And so I think that kind of got the word out to some other people that, hey, they have some pretty good investigators who can do some good work.
Yeah, it's strange how Skinwalker Ranch is just so known for all the high strangeness. What's your take and perspective on that specific location and why it experiences such a high degree of unexplained activity?
There is a lot of unexplained things going on in that area. Now, whether we can attribute that to some natural formation of the earth underneath, some weird magnetic field, or if you want to go, farther into saying it's some kind of interdimensional portal, but, I'm not going to say that. I'm just saying that there are a number of things that occurred there that are really difficult to put a practical explanation on, especially when you talk about the effects on animals and the few mutilations that were taking place at the time, where Oregon has had a few of those as well.
I was also going to ask you too that you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and I'm drawing a blank on the location. There's a point in Oregon where it's a I want to say it's a magnetic anomaly, but there's like a building you can go in, and like it's where I can't remember what it's called, but
yeah, I think it's called the Oregon Vortex or something.
Thank you.
Like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it has to do with perception too, from what I've seen and experienced. It's because things were not built on the straight and level. And so it's kind of a mind trick too. It's not really a skinwalker type of anomaly. It's more of a perception type of thing.
In all your investigations, have you ever encountered cases where unusual weather patterns seem directly correlated with a UAP sighting, either before, during, or after?
Part of one of the tools that we use to help our investigations is there's a device that's called MADAR that people all throughout the country can purchase this node, and it links to a central database, and it collects data on anomalies or variations in electromagnetic force of the earth, in milligauss, compass deflections, radiation reading changes, and things like that. And what we look for at that, basically, if there is an alert, meaning it has gone outside of a parameter, we look to see if that coincides with some kind of event or sighting. And one tends to make the other one a little stronger. So if, let's say, if somebody saw a UFO fly over an area where there was a node and the node deflected at the same time the report came in, that's a little bit more physical, substantial evidence than somebody just saying something happened. And to be honest with you, it's happened more than once. And people can buy this thing and become part of the node. I mean, we're just talking several $100s, and it links up. If you've got an internet, then it links to the central location, and it stores the data every minute, 24 hours a day. And people can access it for free. On every one of our reports, we are required to do a very substantial weather analysis. And we look at the data that's collected, usually at an airport or some reporting station. They do their reports hourly, and we can collect that data to look at all sorts of phenomenon, whether there was wind, high clouds, low clouds, rain, temperature variations, dew point, all of that stuff. And we look to see if there is a correlation. At this point, I can't think of any time that we've actually found a one-to-one correlation. Generally, if you have overhead clouds where you have partially obscured visual contact with something, that tends to make people think it blinks in and out rather than just going behind a cloud. Fortunately or unfortunately, the Starlink satellite launches tend to fall into that category when they initially go up. So we get a lot of reports of that. Sometimes people will report orbs because their infrared camera at night found something, and the next day they go and look at what triggered the alarm, and they look at, there's been an orb. A lot of that is just insects under infrared light too. But there are cases where people have photographed or light anomalies, and we could not put an explanation to them. And so that falls into one of our unknown categories. And we do have them.
Something that's really fascinated me too is just the increase of USO reports. Can you tell me yours or MUFON's stance on these types of reports?
Interesting, but we have a lot of professional sailors and military people who are seeing this. A lot of reports, again, if there is photo evidence or whatever, it's just beginning to come out. Really, it's an interesting concept because people have just started looking at it. They've kind of put it in the back of their mind for years, but there's been a lot of cases where things have been connected to large bodies of water. Depending where you go, if you go out into the sea and you stir up certain type of algae, it will luminesce and it creates a light. But I think that, it's kind of an unexplored area. We haven't really explored the oceans or the seas like we have many other locations. And these anomalies, people just say, well, gee, that's neat. I never knew that happened. And maybe they don't know, but there are instances now where people are seeing craft go into and come out of bodies of water, and nobody's explained that yet.
I think what makes it even more interesting is when it comes from, credible sources like naval personnel. And there just seems to be a lot of prevalence in areas like South America. Mm-hmm. So why do you think South America is a hot spot for such major UAP activity in general?
Something must be drawing whatever it is to that area, whether it's because it is more of an isolated part of the globe because it's closer to the polar region. If we're looking at Argentina or South Africa or someplace like that, there are mountain ranges there. People tend to see more objects or anomalous things by mountain ranges. Really hard to explain. And, you and I both know that one compelling case where you had all of these school children observing more or less the same thing. And for no good reason other than curiosity, one of our top psychologists went to the area almost immediately and interviewed people. He wasn't expecting to find anything, but he has a documentary out on, what these kids saw in common. He didn't expect to get the information he got, and it kind of surprised him. We do know and have seen that there were fortifications that were created by German soldiers who, migrated to the South America, Argentina region. We do know that there were areas where it seems like they were doing some kind of sophisticated manufacturing or experimentation. That stuff is there. I mean, it's not unheard of. There are reports of individuals, witnesses who saw German boats, submarines, freighters, things like that coming into these South American ports. Are any of these connected with what's happened in there? I don't know, but it's certainly interesting to see how it kind of correlates with a lot of this. I mean, there were, people used to say that there was things going on in South America, but none of that has been substantiated. So it's difficult to say, and maybe it has to do with the socioeconomic or religious aspect of the people in the area. I don't know, but there are a lot of anomalous events that take place there.
Do you ever think it's possible that, I don't know, maybe historical or cultural narratives in regions like South America or unexplained archaeological finds, sometimes linked to theories like, elongated skulls, ever seem to kind of intersect with modern UAP reports?
Yeah, I think those pretty much were refuted. And when they had a chance to look at DNA and other evidence, they said, that's kind of not it. I think basically, if you're going to get anything concrete in that area, you would have to look at the work that's been done by Dr. Gary Nolan at Stanford. He tends to be kind of like the clearinghouse for getting all of this stuff because it's an interest of his, and he firmly believes in it, and he likes to go through and document it from a scientific standpoint. They do some very sophisticated tests down there. I think he had something to do with looking at those mummies and kind of said, I don't think it jives. There are things that we can't explain about where it has to do with certain beings. I mean, you're talking about evidence of the reptilians or whatever. I mean, if you look at Egyptian hieroglyphics, you can see animal type individuals in the hieroglyphics. Where do they come from, and why in the world would somebody just create that? Who knows?
You have a background in biochemistry and biophysics. How does your scientific training influence your perspective on the UAP phenomenon and with your work with MUFON in general?
Well, I'll go back to the parent company's motto, which is that they're dedicated to the scientific study of these anomalies for the betterment of humanity, and they try to approach anything that is reported to them from a scientific data gathering type of scientific method. We have a certain format that we use to investigate things, and basically I won't say that we're trying to debunk, but we're trying to find reasonable explanations for most of it, because we do get back to our reporters and say, hey, this is what we think, or hey, we can't explain this. So we tend to take a scientific approach, which I like, and many of our investigators have backgrounds in astronomy, police work, medicine. We are very vetted in what we do before we give somebody the title field investigator.
Would you say that your background with science shapes your approach to how you analyze and deal with these reports?
Yeah, it's kind of if it falls into the paranormal or whatever, basically we can't investigate it. That's not part of what we do. So I might get back to that person and say, hey, maybe if you talk to this organization, they can do something to help you. I'll always get back to them and try and give them some positive feedback, but there's only so much that falls within the MUFON philosophy of doing those investigations, because we're all volunteers. We don't get paid for it.
Is there any particular way or thing you guys do to process maybe the more unconventional and bizarre reports that can't be easily categorized?
Some of it, you just got to go, gee, that sounds really interesting, and I wish I could help you further, but maybe this other person might be able to help you better. There are levels to our investigations. If we know, as you say, this is totally far out and BS, then it's a quick, yeah, okay, thank you for telling us. That doesn't happen too often. Most of the time, people are very sincere about what they report. Maybe they're mistaken about what they see, but they're very sincere about it, and we try to help them out. It's difficult. We try to look for patterns. We're trying to piece things together. One of these days, maybe it will. Our database is open. We have an arrangement with the government, with Arrow, and they have access to our database. And whether they are making correlations that we aren't seeing, I don't know. We don't get back to me. So, I'm a small cog in this whole machinery. But it's if there's ever anything that comes about that is really monumental, we find out about it.
Speaking of military involvement, what is your take on the Kecksburg incident that took place in 1965, specifically on the acorn-shaped object and the swift military response?
Kecksburg incident was really strange. Boy, it keeps going back to, that the old Nazi bell type of thing, but in the hieroglyphics. But, you're thinking about the time, and you think about how quickly the military responded to it. You almost think that it was a piece of space hardware that somebody'd been tracking. They knew when it hit that it was going to be hot because it came through the atmosphere. Could it have been the nose cone of something that malfunctioned? Maybe. Really hard to say. I mean, the shape is kind of anomalous to what you usually get reported. The fact that it happened in an area where there were a lot of people who got there before the military did, but then again, the military got there very quickly. Somebody knew something about it. There were instances where perhaps things that happened in the desert area were connected to our early lunar landing program with Surveyor, because we did a number of experiments of landing things in the desert to kind of simulate the moon. And it's difficult to say how many of those might have been misconstrued as a craft landing or something as well. As time goes on, you learn things. It came out that, the U.S. government swiped a Sputnik for a day or two to take it apart and see what was going on, and then got it back as it was doing an American tour through our country. So there might have been a lot of different things going on. It was probably something that was supposed to attain orbit and didn't go as high as they wanted. It's difficult to say that was extraterrestrial when a lot of it points to it was, I got to cover this up because we made a boo-boo. Radiation has come into play, and, it affected people. And we know it for sure. Where the radiation would come from, I don't know. I would think if it's an advanced civilization, they're going to be beyond leaking radiation on people. So I don't know. interesting thing. People certainly believe that they lose time. I mean, look at the Travis Walton thing. I mean, he was gone for days, and you know, his buddies swear up and down that it happened, and that's one of those multiple witnesses things that hey, I can't say that it didn't happen. Evidence points that it did. Did he suffer any physical effects? I don't know. I don't know for sure. But there are more than Betty and Barney Hill and Travis Walton that have been abducted. And that's what our professionals are trying to figure out. I mean, certainly you've got a number of similarities in their experiences. So how do you dismiss that? It's really difficult to say. Yeah, I think if anybody's ever going to find any really hard evidence that's irrefutable, you've got to be set up for it and waiting for it and hoping it's going to happen right in front of your eyes. I mean, we're getting better at getting to that position. Let's put it this way. A lot of what we're doing is getting ready to look for some of these things. I mean, you get abducted, steal something off the table, bring it with you. I'm sure you don't think of that stuff, and I'm sure if it's a more intelligent race, they're not going to say, "Hey, look what he just slipped in his pocket," sort of thing. That's why people are reluctant to report things, because they don't want that stigma that's attached to it. They don't want to be ridiculed about it. Let's go back to the Trent pictures. Okay, so the two pictures of the saucer object, which 1951, nobody disputes that they took the pictures. They were investigated by the FBI. They were done photo analysis later on by the Air Force and MUFON. Nobody could refute the pictures. And it wasn't just the Trent, it wasn't just mom and dad. Father-in-law, who was one farm over, also saw it. And it turns out that later on, and we're talking a couple of decades later, a person who was a student in McMinnville at the time, a day or two before, had gone out into this highway that was kind of near the Trent farm, and a bunch of people would sit out there and they would wait for the UFOs to come, and they were watching them before the Trents actually took the photograph. It was something that people did. They knew about it, and it wasn't until they saw the photos, I guess when they were having a grand opening of the McMenamins Hotel, they saw the photos and said, "Oh yeah, we used to go out in the highway and watch these things." And so, some of these occurrences, one side doesn't meet the other until just an odd coincidence.
Is there any or at all a perceived correlation or even an overlap between UAP reports and just unexplained missing persons cases, like, all the 411 stuff?
That's a different one. You're talking about the old David Pilates type of thing. Well, people get lost, obviously. Something happens to them. The ones that go missing entirely, is it part of this phenomenon? I don't know. Is it attached to other things that are more paranormal? I don't know. The fact that sometimes children who are certainly not capable survivalists come out of the woods several days, a week or so later from a different location with no shoes or whatever, and they've survived just fine. I can't explain it. I don't know how that happens. I'm not sure, because we don't really deal in the missing persons end of things, but certainly there's a lot of anomalous events that can be attributed to very notable and distinguished people. There, I don't remember what it was, the English pilot, the general, who took off in his airplane, flew into a cloud, looked down below at the air base and saw, hey, look at all these one-winged airplanes that were yellow and the ground crew's wearing blue, and I wonder what that's going on, because when they came back, I mean, they're all biplanes and the ground crew wears brown, but then several years later, this wing commander notes that all the planes are yellow and the crew's wearing blue, and nobody can explain that kind of a time shift sort of thing. So I don't know. These are just some, maybe we're dealing with these, portal events that we just don't know about.
Is it challenging sometimes to, maintain a boundary between personal interest and your representation of the organization?
Sure. At times it is. And basically I have to wear the company hat when I do things. As far as my own personal interests or fascination goes, some of this stuff I'd really like to dig into, but I don't do it as part of the organization. And I don't utilize what they bring to the table.
There definitely seems to be a recent acceleration in mainstream discussion and just overall government acknowledgement, including the shift in terminology, from UFO to UAP. So my question to you is, why do you think this is happening now rather than decades ago?
I would personally guess that the world is becoming more connected with the internet, with people who are coming together who share a common interest, and basically technology. I mean, our ability to use cell phones to take fantastic photographs is just amazing, and to record things. I mean, I grew up where a black and white TV was amazing, and and just in my lifetime, I've seen things come across where I find it hard to believe. I thought Star Trek was cool with a communicator, and here I'm using a cell phone. A lot of this stuff is because technology and communications has advanced so quickly. I think that this information gets dispersed more quickly. And so I think that you are finding more people with a common interest to solve a problem getting together. And pretty much I think that's why recently, and we're talking maybe the last decade or two, that's why things have started to maybe come to a head a little faster than they might have in the 60s or something.
Something that I think really needs to be talked about is the rapid advancement of AI and increasing sophistication of deepfakes. How does this impact MUFON's ability to authenticate photographic or even video evidence? And does it present a challenge at all?
What we do as part of our photo and video analysis is we will subject it to a metadata analysis. And we will look to see, has it been modified? Does it jive with the longitude and latitude and time of day and date that they say this thing occurred? And we look to see, has something been embedded? Has something been modified? If we think through our basic analysis it looks legit, we send it on to our more experienced photo analysis group, and they look at it. And that's where AI, it can generate things, but it does leave markers. I don't know, and I'm certainly not a photo expert. I would guess that maybe as AI advances, that maybe there are going to be advancements in detecting if it's been modified or not. I don't know. I'm not at that cutting edge level. I mean, a lot of people say that, AI is coming right around the corner. Others say, well, maybe in 10, 20 years, hard to say. I don't know, but we certainly know from the movie industry that it's advancing pretty far. I mean, Super Bowl commercials. You saw that Martha Stewart dancing on air, it's frightening, and it could go that way. You never know. Hopefully there'll be enough calm and stable minds that they can say, look, let's take a look at this again and realize that probably this didn't occur. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing what's being done.
All right, Dean, last question for you. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share about MUFON's ongoing work or even future UAP investigations?
Not the only thing I can say of is we're always looking for more field investigators. If it's an interest of yours, certainly go to our parent website, MUFON.com, and look at what's necessary to become a field investigator and follow the steps and take the tests. And if that's an interest of yours, we can certainly use your help. The more, the merrier. Josh, it's been a pleasure, and I hope if you have anything you want to talk about in the future, you not hesitate to get hold of me.
If you guys enjoyed this interview, be sure to go ahead and smack that like and subscribe button for more interviews with experts, eyewitnesses, the whole shebang. You will not want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. I'll see you guys in the next one.